Why am I wearing a Leslie Frost t-shirt today? Who knows?
You didn't tell me there was going to be a test.
No, I didn't tell you. I wanted to
air.
surprise you with this one. Hold the thought. Because we got to do a little business here off the top. I'll give you guys a little extra time to think about this. For the audience at home watching or listening to this the day after the budget, we should tell you that we are doing this live at TVO the day the budget was delivered. So we're going to do something a little different here, and we are integrating the agenda and our podcast. So with that, welcome everyone to the onpoli podcast. I'm Steve Paikin.
And I'm Michael McGrath.
I'm Jessica Smith-Cross, the editor-in-chief of the Trillium.
And tonight on the pod, it is Budget Day in the province of Ontario, so here comes a special edition of onpoli.
It's Thursday, May 15th, 2025, so let's get to it.
Okay, so now we return to my shirt. I got Leslie Frost on here. Can you guys see this all right? Anyway, Leslie Frost, who was Premier of Ontario from 1949 to 1961, and the question is, why am I wearing a t-shirt with Les Frost on it? And the answer is, come on, guys, you know this. Where were we today?
Oh, the Frost
There was a
building.
Frost.
We were in the Frost Block, which is where the Ministry of Finance is. And do you know why they've named the Ministry of Finance after Leslie Frost? You will not believe this. This is kind of crazy. Leslie Frost, when he was Premier of Ontario, was also the Minister of Finance of Ontario / Treasurer at the same time for about 6 years. Can you imagine that? He was Premier and his own Finance Minister at the same time for about 6 years. So this being Budget Day, I got Leslie Frost on. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Now, where are we? We got to talk about the budget here, right? Okay, so let's get to it here. We have been wondering what kind of budget this would be, given the economic circumstances that the province of Ontario finds itself in. We had some decent economic growth going, and then along came Trump's tariffs and the ensuing trade war, and we don't know what is going to take place down the road in terms of slower economic growth or job losses. So let's get into it. Where does Ontario stand today?
Right. So Ontario has delivered a $232.5 billion budget that will run deeper than forecasted deficits in the near and midterm. The government had predicted that it would see a deficit of $9.8 billion for 2024-25. That has been lowered to $6 billion, but other fiscal periods are a different story. The deficit that had been projected for this year of 2025-26 that was going to be $4.6 billion will in fact be $14.6 billion. So a $10 billion increase in the deficit. $7.8 billion deficit for 2026-27. That's up from a projected surplus of $500 million. And by 2027-28, they are predicting an even smaller surplus of $200 million. So these deficits, the budget is quick to explain, are due to elevated economic uncertainty from tariffs and threats to Canadian sovereignty. The province is positioning this as a budget focused on protecting jobs given the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs. To that end, they announced details of the Protecting Ontario account, which is a $5 billion fund that Ontario businesses can use if they have exhausted available funding. How that fund will be accessed by businesses is a little ambiguous right now. They have announced other measures to this end, including an increased tax credit for businesses and a deferral of certain provincially administered taxes, as well as WSIB rebates. Now, Jessica, you had some economists, both of whom are fans of the podcast, if I recall. You had some writing for the Trillium. What are they saying?
Yeah, we kind of hoarded the brain power in the press gallery today,
did, yeah.
if I could say so. So we had Brian Lewis, who's a former province's chief economist, and we had Peter Weltman, who's the province's former financial accountability officer. They both kind of tackled the same idea that, Steve, you were getting to off the top, the very unprecedented nature of these times that we find ourselves in, the economic storm clouds, Trump, tariffs. So Brian Lewis concluded that this budget was always going to be a balancing act for the government. It was going to have to deliver on campaign promises, navigate the economic storm clouds, and maintain some kind of fiscal discipline. And he finds that the province did a pretty good job of that. But he does note that this path back to balance that the province is projecting it's going to be on is very narrow. So it's projecting like lower than inflation spending increases in health care, which is it's not really been done of late, and almost flat education spending and increases coming up. So he knows that that's really hard, especially when there are already gaps in healthcare, like people who don't have a family doctor. Peter Weltman, on the other hand, took the view of, whether this budget meets this moment of this unprecedented time. He sort of made the case that in an unprecedented moment like this one, you should do something bigger and bolder and not just sort of get through it, but go for it. It should really unleash itself. And I wanted to make a comment about this column that I really enjoyed that's maybe just for the really nerds like you. So Peter Weltman was the financial accountability officer. He had released these like huge detailed reports from the people in his office about something. We would ask Minister Bethlen-Falvey about these reports. Minister Bethlen-Falvey would say, well, that just sort of captures just a snapshot in time or a moment in time, and sort of dismiss the questions that we were asking about these reports. So Peter's column takes is this budget just a moment in time, or is it something a little bit more?
It's a little shot at the treasurer there.
Just a
Right?
dig.
Just a little dig. Just a little dig. Okay, you want to pick up on that?
Well, I mean, you and I have enjoyed Mr. Weltman's wit on the podcast
Indeed.
before. So I appreciate him being a little bit more liberated now that he's no longer an officer of the legislature. Do we want to talk portfolios here?
Yeah, talk portfolios. Okay, let's do. I mean, as we saw with the wrap up I did earlier for the agenda, healthcare is always number one when it comes to budget spending. Education is always number two. Social services is always number three. Interest on the debt, number four. It's the fourth biggest line item. The interest on the debt. Okay. But housing, we want to talk housing here. Talk to us about what's going on in there.
Right. So there are two sides to this. For the budget, any budget will always mention housing starts, and that's because it's a really important economic indicator, right? If people are building lots of new homes, that is a good sign that the economy is booming, and if they are not building a lot of new homes, that's a bad sign, generally speaking. But of course, this government also has a housing target of 1.5 million new homes by 2031. So the fact that housing starts have in this budget been revised pretty sharply downwards is both a bad economic indicator and also a political problem for this government. They are moving further away from meeting their housing target, and they were already not looking great in terms of meeting that target. That said, the government is not sitting still. Earlier this week, the province introduced the Protect Ontario by Building Faster and Smarter Act, which I think is Bill 17. Two controversial changes from this act include reducing the ability of Ontario cities to impose inclusionary zoning rules. This is a power that had been first granted by the Wynne government, then was substantially constrained by the Ford government when they took office in 2018. It is now being constrained even further. There is an additional change. The government is basically saying that cities have no ability to impose building conditions on like new developments, new condos, above and beyond what the building code in Ontario already requires. Both of these changes are really going to bite hardest in Toronto, where we had both inclusionary zoning rules that were pretty substantial, and also Toronto had what was called the Green Building Standard. That both of those policies now seem to be more or less dead letters, for lack of a better word. Jessica, what did you see?
So in healthcare, the headline's $91 billion overall, $1.8 billion for the Primary Care Action Plan. This is the one led by Dr. Jane Philpott to connect everybody with primary care, like a family doctor. There's $300 million over 4 years to expand primary care teaching clinics capacity, which is dedicated to training primary care doctors, and $280 million over 2 years to expand the Integrated Community Health Services Centers. The name of them I always forget, but these you might recognize as the sort of new private clinics that the government is setting up right now. They do MRIs and CT scans, but the plan is to expand them to do endoscopies and orthopedic surgeries, though the government is way behind on their plans to do a call for proposals to get that up and running.
I'm going to admit something here. Endoscopies, what are they?
I think that's like an internal camera thing.
It's the
I'm not a
camera?
doctor.
I think it literally means like they put a scope into you.
That kind of stuff. So not a camera like we're talking to right now.
Not that big, though.
I really hope not.
Not that big. Okay. All right. So we've done housing. We've done healthcare.
Yeah.
You got to hit education here.
Yes, in education, $55.8 million is being spent over 2 years to train 2,600 new teachers by 2027. Base spending is also going to rise slightly from $39 billion this year to $41 billion by 2025-26 for elementary and secondary education.
Okay. And as we suggested earlier, the health is number one, education's number two, social services, child services, number three. What do you got on that, Jesse?
$20.4 billion. $16.2 billion will be spent on interest payments as well,
That's
as you
number
highlighted
4.
earlier.
Wow. Okay. What about on infrastructure?
Right. The government has, we mentioned this on the agenda earlier, the government has made the cut to the gas tax permanent and removed tolls on the provincially owned part of Highway 407. That was, the government notes will save Ontarians about $100 a year, while the latter could save Ontarians who use that route daily very much more. That said, the gas tax cut will deprive the Treasury of about $1.3 billion, and removing those tolls, of course, will not benefit some drivers at all. Like if you're in Windsor and never take the 407, I mean, maybe this is a nice sentiment, but it doesn't benefit you anything.
Now let's just remember, when they say they're cutting the gas tax, which will deprive the Treasury of $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion annual, that's annually.
Yes.
That's this year and next and for as far as the eye can see. And let's go off script and talk a little politics here, which is to say, if you gave an income tax cut, everybody would get that. If you're cutting the gas tax, only drivers are getting that.
Yes.
If you only take public transit, you're not going to realize that tax cut. Just as if, when they took the $200 off the license plate fees, you had to be a driver who gets a license plate in order to realize that tax cut.
And the bigger the car, the more you drive. It
There
might
you
be
go.
incentivizing some things that are not so good for the planet right now.
And the politics of this are, I would suggest, pretty obvious. Downtown Toronto people tend to take, and downtown Ottawa people may very well take a lot more transit than they do driving. It's the 905 and the suburban belt ridings that do a lot more driving, and that's the home base of Ford Nation.
This is a very, very long story. You can go back to the 2010 mayoral election where Rob Ford won, and it was almost a perfect sort of one-to-one correlation as the rate of motor vehicle use went up in what were then the city's 44 wards. The share of people who voted for Rob Ford increased. It was almost like a perfect correlation. And you could. I haven't seen anybody do the exact analysis. I would not be at all surprised if we saw a similar relationship with Doug Ford as premier.
Right. Okay, this budget, we read it all, right? 232
Sure did.
pages long. There are thousands upon thousands of numbers in there. So we want to go through, obviously not all of them. I'm really interested in the kind of the one or two numbers that just caught your eye and you thought, I'm nerdy enough to want to bring this to the onpoli table tonight. Okay, McGrath, go first.
Okay, so the province had announced in April that it would be providing colleges and universities with $750 million in funding for courses related to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Due to changes at the federal level for international students that we've heard about so much, Ontario's post-secondary schools are in a bit of a budgetary freefall right now. There's just not that much else in this budget. In fact, post-secondary funding is scheduled to fall in the next 3 years. So the sector is not in love with that news. I just, before we went to air, I saw the Council of Universities has put out a release. And whenever a sector does these kinds of responses, they say very nice things about all the good news in the budget, and they finish the release with, all that said, we really would have loved more money. The two helicopters in Niagara and Windsor region I found interesting. This is the province really stepping into basically border patrol roles, not unheard of in the provincial level, but obviously something that the premier likes to talk about his role in what you might either think of as like a federal arena. And because we're this show and it is in the budget, I'm just going to mention the thing about the bike lanes.
Yes.
The government is basically reintroducing its law to remove the bike lanes in Toronto. The text of the budget bill came out after the minister's speech, and what it seems to be doing is basically, instead of giving the minister of transportation the power to remove bike lanes at his discretion, now it is using the law to command him to do so. This could be relevant in future court cases or even in the current court case, but we don't have the time to go into all of that right now.
Okay. Jesse, what did you like?
Well, if you ask me for a number, the number has got to be zip.
Maybe zero?
I'm stretching your question a little bit. But the thing I wanted to talk about was the special economic zones. They're mentioned in the budget, but I learned zip about them from said budget. So this is this plan, it's a bill before the House, Bill 5, that will give Cabinet the power to declare a special economic zone in the province, and then give Cabinet the power to exempt things in that zone from the requirements of provincial and local laws, which is a big deal.
Yep.
And there's not, in the bill, they're not constraining that at all. It can't exempt things from criminal laws, like a federal law. I can't exempt things from charter rights.
Yeah. They are not invoking the notwithstanding clause.
Yes.
So far in the text of the bill.
So far. Or with the bike lanes.
Yes.
But back to these. So there's been quite a back and forth. What are they going to do with this? Why do they want it? Why no restrictions on it? You've got Indigenous leaders who are concerned that even though it can't actually legally take away their right to be consulted, that will be the effect of it. Labor leaders, came out as far as saying this is going to usher in child labor within these zones, which I think may be probably stretching things a little bit beyond what would actually happen. But there has been a concern from, actual lawyers with the CCLA that it could be used with labor, some requirements of labor rights. That led to a giant back and forth. This week, I finally got a statement from the Premier's office saying that they won't do that, and also that they can't, which I don't think seems to be clear in the language of the bill itself. So I bring this up because I think it's a really interesting bill. It could be potentially really impactful. It's one of those things, like you make this decision now, and who knows what 3 governments down the road are going to do with this power. But we're not talking about it that much. So I bring it to the podcast where I think people care.
And I think there's an interesting political issue here where I think the government does not want to start even carving out something as obvious as labor rights, even though this government, frankly, particularly when we talk about like blue-collar industrial unions, they've got reasonably good relations there, probably don't want to jeopardize those relations. But if they open the door to carving it out for labor law, then it's going to be, environmentalists asking, why aren't you protecting this? It will just become open season on this legislation, and they're just really hoping to get it passed through the legislature in its current clean, if I can use that language, its current clean form, and then they will try to reassure all these stakeholders, like, we're not going to use it that crazy way.
Press secretaries have been blowing up my phone since I did the story on the unions with the child labor comments. They'll be like, no, we don't, it's not for that. Where did they get that? Or no, we're not going to use it for that. But they haven't. Why didn't you say that when I asked you about it? Because there's a very careful way that they're dealing with this. And I do think it has a lot to do with their labor stakeholders.
Do I get to put a number on the table here?
Sure.
Okay. Do I get to sound like a broken record here? Do I get to say that I had this question again for the Minister of Finance for, I don't know, the 84th year in a row or something here? My number's 6.4, as in $6.4 billion. As in $6.4 billion that taxpayers are going to subsidize everybody in the payment of our electricity bills. And as I said to the Minister of Finance earlier on the agenda, he and I make 6-figure salaries. Why am I getting a check from the government of Ontario to help me pay my hydro bill? And why is he? I don't understand it. I look at my hydro bill every, how often I get it, month, I guess, and there's $8. $8 subsidy from the province of Ontario. I don't need the $8. He doesn't need the $8, and yet there it is. Anyway, it makes little sense to me, but there it is, and it was $5.9 billion last time. This problem's getting bigger and worse. So there it is. I'm getting off my, what do you call it again? What's that thing?
Soapbox.
Soapbox, thank you. I'm off my soapbox now. Okay, I asked him about booze as well. Why don't you do a little something on booze here?
Right. So this was a big focus of the provincial budget, but let's just go through the numbers here. LCBO revenue is set to decline significantly despite the liberalization of alcohol sales. In 2025-26, they expect to earn $1.85 billion, which is down substantially from what it had earned in the previous year. There's also losses in the taxes that the government imposes on beer, wine, and spirits. So we're losing money both ways. According to the province, there are several reasons for this. They are reducing the markup on alcohol sales and giving larger discounts to bars, restaurants, convenience stores, people who buy their alcohol from the LCBO. Also, there's currently no American booze on the shelves, which is limiting selection. And then we did have this funny moment in the technical briefing, and I swear I got permission to mention this. The deputy minister offered that some people just aren't drinking as much as they used to, and then he was he hurried to add, not him, he's still drinking. He's doing his part for the finances of Ontario. But yes, many people are drinking less, and that is just having an obvious sort of mechanical effect, reducing alcohol revenues in the province.
You can see the newspaper headlines. Minister of Finance driving his deputy minister to drink. There we go. There we go. That's there.
Well, so while we're talking about the tech brief, I have to mention your hobby horse, your soapbox. I mean, we don't get that many questions in the tech briefing. We only get 2 questions in the tech briefing.
Right.
And it's rare coinage, and you burned it to once again ask about the hydro subsidies. I respect the game.
and you know what? I'm going to keep doing it, because to me it just doesn't. I don't know. I don't know why by people. Anyway, I've said enough.
Kathleen Wynne is why, right? Because of everything that happened before she got kicked out of office in 2018, hydro bills were all people screamed about. I think they came into office, they wanted the issue to go away. They came up with the easiest, fastest solution, which was we're going to subsidize it, and then they don't want to open up that can of worms. It's got to be it, right?
Well, if the deficit is $14.6 billion, and you might actually be able to cut that in half just by not giving, I won't say you could cut the whole thing in half by not giving people who don't need the break a break. I mean, you could make some progress there. But anyway, okay, I know you're sick to death of hearing me talk about it anyway. 232 pages, this budget. You got an example of it right there.
Physical copy here.
There it is.
It is.
Now, as these things go, bigger than normal, smaller than normal, what?
It is slightly thicker than last year's budget, but I think it is thin in 2 ways, right? I mean, it is certainly not the thickest budget you and I have ever covered, but it is really notable to me how little news there is in this budget. We just came out of an election, and I normally think that this is the moment where a government wants to present a big budget where they're going to spend the political capital that they earn on top of all the money they're going to spend, and there's some stuff in here. I don't want to pretend that it's not an important document. It spends $200 and some odd billion. Of course, it's an important document, but it just I don't know. I did not feel that there was a ton of meat in this budget.
You know what part of it is, and I mean we've all seen enough budgets to know this. Back in the day, you really, really didn't find out what the province's plans were until budget day, and you got in the lockup and you read it. Mm-hmm. They've leaked their own budget for the last, many months in a row. A couple of weeks anyway, for sure.
Campaigned on lots of it.
Of it, yeah. So by the time you read the budget, there's really not much surprising that's in there. Chad, how much time we got left here? 2.5 minutes to go? That's enough time to talk about something that's in this budget that I, frankly, am surprised to see in a Ford Nation budget, because it's so off-brand. The notion that cabinet ministers will be able to retain their honorifics, as in the Honourable John Michael McGrath, the Honourable JSC, for the rest of their lives after they leave politics. We have never done that in 158 years of life in the province of Ontario. What did you think when you saw it?
It reminded me of the King's Council, Queen's Council thing with lawyers. It's really nothing but a title, but it meant a lot to some people. Now, that ended up becoming controversial because they were picked through a kind of patronage-y manner, which wouldn't be the case, obviously, with this one. But that notion of, like, your title matters, and this matters to some people, and they're going to do it, reminded me of that.
And I thought the finance minister was very kind when we asked him, what is this doing in the budget? And he said, these are people, if you've served in cabinet, these are people who've done public service, and I want to honor the public service that they've done, whether they are in our party or in any other. And I thought that was a very nice move.
I guess we should put on the record as well, if you serve as a federal cabinet minister, you get to call yourself the Honourable whatever your name is for the rest of your life. Yes. That's been a practice that has happened federally. Obviously, the Prime Minister, et cetera, the Governor General, they are your honorable whatevers forever. But provincially, no. It's never been the case provincially. And there have been some pretty impressive people in the province of Ontario. Leslie Frost is one of them. Bill Davis was another one. John Robarts was another one. who were pretty impressive people who went back to being Mr. Frost, Mr. Davis, Mr. Robarts after their political careers were over. But those days are gone, or soon to be gone anyway. Okay, Chad tells me he's out of fingers, and that means we're out of time. So that's the budget for this year. Jessica Smith-Cross, it's always a delight to have you at our table. Please come visit us one more time again. And don't forget to read her stuff in The Trillium, which is available at
thetrillium.ca.
There we go. That's pretty easy to find. And you and I, we should say, we're not going to be here tomorrow night because we're not going to do this all over again like we normally do on our Friday night things.
Yes.
So
we'll be here next week.
I'll see you in 8 days then, I guess.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, we'll do that then. Okay. All right. Do we sign off here? That's where we say, that's our On Poly Podcast Budget Special for Thursday, May 15th, 2025.
You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so you get notified each time a new episode is available, and you can see the video version of the podcast on the TVO Today YouTube channel.
We're always happy to hear your feedback on politics@tvo.org. That's it. Good night, everybody.